All righty. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this webinar with the New Hampshire Insurance Department. We'll get started shortly here, but just want to thank you all for joining for this and let you know that we have member-led webinars occasionally throughout the year, whether that's about insurance, different finances, or business resources. So I'll leave it to the department now to take it away. I'm not sure who wants to go first here.
All right. Well,
Yeah, there you go.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. I said some technology problems a little bit earlier today, but thank you very much for having us. My name is Keith Nye. I'm the Deputy Commissioner here at the Insurance Department. And on behalf of Commissioner Betancourt, who could not join us today, I just wanted to say we're very excited to be here. I'm here with my colleagues, James Fox, who you'll hear from momentarily. But James is our Property and Casualty Lines Director, and he's going to speak, amongst other things, about, I believe it's workers' compensation insurance today. But that having been said, why don't we jump right into kind of some planned comments that we have, which is kind of an overview of the department, what we do for consumers, and then we will transition it over into the workers' comp discussion. So what I can tell you is the insurance department here in New Hampshire is the oldest insurance department in the nation. I wish I could remember exactly when it was incorporated, but it was well over 150 years ago. That being said, the department has a core mission, which is to promote and protect the public good by ensuring the existence of a safe and competitive insurance marketplace through the development and enforcement of the insurance laws of the state of New Hampshire. And we're committed to doing so in an honest, effective, and timely manner. So overall, as a department, absolutely, we're focused on making sure that consumers are protected. We do it through legislative means as well as many others. But probably the most important consumer protection that the insurance department provides to consumers is through our financial regulation division. That division in particular is tasked with making sure that all of the insurance companies that write business in the state of New Hampshire remain financially solvent, such that when you, the consumer, have a claim, that the company has the money to pay that claim. As you can imagine, there's a lot that goes into that, making sure companies have, assets in place, making sure there are operations in place. And it looks in the form of quarterly analyses at financials, as well as annual examinations of these companies to make sure that policies and procedures are effective in making sure companies stay financially solvent. Probably the most recognizable part of what the insurance department does is through our consumer services division. And our consumer services division really is one of three legs of consumer protection, and I'll talk about each of them. When you kind of think, it's almost like a three-legged stool of consumer protection. You have the front end piece of regulation, which is our compliance unit here at the department. That unit is tasked with looking at every single policy that is sold in the state of New Hampshire, reviewing it, approving it, make sure it meets the requirements of our laws. They also look at forms such as applications, back-end claim forms, all to make sure that the public-facing documents, those that are seen by consumers, meet the requirements of law. In the middle, we have consumer services, which I'll come back to here momentarily. And then on the back end, we have our market conduct function, which is more like an audit team. So on the back end, companies have, rewind here slightly. Companies that write business here in New Hampshire have to follow certain policies and procedures and the laws of New Hampshire. So our market conduct team is actually a group that will many times go to an insurance company, but just as frequently will actually do a desk audit. And those teams will actually look at the company's policies and procedures, looking at complaints and looking for, are there any systemic issues or of non-compliance at the insurance company, perhaps where a company's not paying claims properly, engaging in unfair claim settlement practices, or engaging in poor sales practices. So you have front-end protection, making sure everything complies with the law, back-end protection where we're looking for systemic issues, but really kind of the core in the middle is the consumer services unit. That unit has a mission of educating, navigating, and investigating. And really what that means is the unit is built out in such a way, and by the way, the unit is very busy. It consists of 7 individuals. There's a director, a manager, 4 investigating officers, and a workflow coordinator. The unit last year processed well over 5,200 cases or referrals to the department. Of those 5,200 cases, there were 1,200 formal investigations, and we'll come back to that part of it. And the unit last year facilitated the recovery of more than $6.5 million for New Hampshire residents. And this is money that consumers would not have recovered without us. So what does that really look like? Of those 5,200 cases, many times it's individuals who have a phone call or an email, just a question about what type of products they have. Is it, geez, I have auto insurance. Could you tell me how I could purchase additional coverage? Or I have a homeowner's policy and I want to buy flood insurance. Just kind of general questions about the products. And we consider that our education function. The navigation function is consumers who are typically experiencing problems or who have questions about how insurance works. So we consider that, we help consumers navigate the insurance industry in the context of perhaps somebody has been in an automobile accident and the claim process isn't going the way that he or she likes. Perhaps the company hasn't offered if the car was totaled, a valuation of that automobile that the consumer thought it was worth. Or perhaps it is a homeowner's claim where a tree has fallen on the house and the consumer has a question about what's going to happen next in that claim process. On the health insurance side, it's typically, hey, I need to purchase health insurance. What do I do? So our consumer services staff is prepared to take any of these questions or emails and help consumers navigate what tends to be a very complicated and confusing part of the insurance industry. Lastly, that investigative function is when a consumer, which could be a business, by the way, it doesn't have to be an individual, but when a consumer or a customer has a legitimate grievance about maybe being treated improperly by a sales agent, maybe that issue with the claim on that automobile has escalated to a point where there's a stalemate between the company and the consumer, you can write to us and we will actually reach out to our licensees, typically an insurance company, could be an agent, and we're going to ask questions of that company to kind of help resolve that complaint that the consumer brings to us. To that point, last year, again, we had 1,200 formal investigations, and we recovered more than $6.5 million for New Hampshire's consumers. So all in all, we're an incredibly busy unit, and we're here again, not to help just individuals, but businesses as well. Again, that navigation function might be, hey, what kind of insurance do I need as a new business that wants to start up in New Hampshire? That's kind of a general overview of our consumer protections and customer service unit. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point in time about how the department is structured, additional units that we have in consumer protection. So I'll leave it right there. Any questions from members on today's webinar? Hearing none, I'm going to transition this over to James Fox, our Director of Property and Casualty Insurance, who will speak a little bit about workers' compensation.
Thanks, Keith. So I think my role today is two parts. So the first part is workers' comp, and then the second part is the rest of P&C coverages, which is interesting. But starting with workers' comp, I'm the P&C director. My background is insurance coverage. I used to work at a law firm in Manchester called Divine Millimet doing insurance coverage. When I did that, the only thing we really were concerned about as litigation type people was the workers' comp bar, which was employees trying to sue their employers, and they did not want to accept workers' compensation. So it was about the extent of the workers' compensation bar. But now that I'm at the department, that we have a different role, it's a regulatory role. And the one thing I would add to what he said, our consumer division is fabulous. But your first line of defense, in terms of if you do have a claim, in terms of how smoothly it goes for you, is to work with your producer, your insurance agent. Your insurance agent should write for several companies, and there's and you should talk to them about what companies would best meet your needs. In terms of workers' comp, it's kind of a cookie cutter thing. The workers' comp form, which is part A is workers' comp, and part B is employer liability, which is related to workers' comp, but it is things that don't quite fall within workers' comp. So the workers' comp bar wouldn't apply. Um, but it is sufficiently related that it coverage for that's also provided. Like if a relative brings a claim against the employer. But the way workers' comp works in the state of New Hampshire, which is how I think it works in most states, is that here at the department we do the rates, which ultimately ends up in the premium, and we do the forms, which we approve the forms, which have not changed to my knowledge in many, many years. It's the same basic form, which I've already described. The rates do change. They come out each year, and there's a company called NCCI that does it for several states. Basically, they look at the experience in the state of New Hampshire, and they look at the different employment jobs, and they call classifications, and they determine how much rate should be charged. And then the insurance companies then take that rate and they do a loss cost multiplier. Basically, is it kind of like, I always think of it as their overhead, like how much extra do they need to do what they do. And then that's what basically everybody pays. So everybody kind of starts from the same place. The pricing shouldn't be that different. Obviously, it's kind of very obvious. Like if you're a roofer, everybody talks about those. If you're a company that does roofing and you're trying to get workers' compensation coverage, which is a mandatory coverage and a highly regulated insurance for somebody who's going to go on a roof and might fall off the roof, that's going to be a lot more expensive than if you are seeking coverage for somebody who sits at a desk, like I think most of the people online here do. That's just it's almost obvious. It's the risk. And then after that, the other thing that people probably should know, I guess, is we have the voluntary market and we have what we call the residual market, which we have a residual market for workers' comp and we have residual markets for auto. And if you think, why do we have those? Because these are very important insurances. We want to make sure people can get them and not fall into what's the other option, which is called surplus line, which is less regulated insurance. So we wouldn't want workers to be subject to less regulated insurance because we barely regulate surplus lines. So usually in other areas, think of your personal life. If you have a homeowner's policy and you can't get what we call admitted carriers who are subject to all our regulations to sell your policy because they don't like the condition of your house usually, then you may fall into what's called surplus lines, which is fine in a way, but it's just not as regulated. So your coverages may be wildly different. But in things like workers' compensation and auto, we are more concerned that people get coverage and they get, we know that they're getting good coverages. So we have the voluntary market, which handles most of the people. And then we have the residual market, which is, in essence, all the insurance companies getting together to basically take on the most, usually the newest risks, or the things that are really risky, or the things that are a company has, let's say, a bad experience, a bad track record. So they take those on, and how we do it is we basically have a third party administrator, which would be an insurance company. So you, like right now, I think we have Liberty Insurance Company, which most people have heard of, Technology, which people maybe not have heard of, and then we also have Travelers, and then you basically get assigned to one of those companies because you're in the residual market. They then basically handle the claims that come in, and then the cost of those claims is distributed among all of the insurance companies that write that kind of business in New Hampshire based on the premium, which is how that works in all residual markets. The other thing that I would say that's people should know about this type of insurance is you can call the insurance department about claims, but we don't actually handle the claims in terms of regulating them. That's all handled by the Department of Labor. They have a statute called RSA 281A, which is their workers' compensation statute, which is very long. If you're an employee, you might want to read through it. Does a lot about presumptions for claims and how claims should be handled, and even how policies can be canceled. So they handle all of that. I think they do a great job too. And if you know, we talk to them quite often. We have a dedicated person here at the department named Ruju Davi, and he coordinates a lot of issues. So if you have a question in workers' comp, well, you can call me. If you have a question in workers' comp, get out your pen. It's 603-271-2502. That's a direct line to me. And I will listen to the question, and if I can answer it, I'll answer it. That's what I love doing, is answer insurance questions. And if not, I'll collaborate with Ruju, and the person here who does our rates is Christian Citarella, and he's an actuary, so he's well versed in all of that. So we will all get together and figure things out if we can, and if we have to involve the labor department, we can also do that. I also say that the other thing about from a regulatory perspective is that the NCCI, which is a industry created entity, again, handles all of these issues in terms of determining what the rate's going to be for all of industry. So they're heavily involved in these kind of claims too, in terms of like if sometimes there's a dispute as to how somebody should be classified. Like somebody a construction company says, oh, this person is an office person, and they go to the job site, but they don't ever get on the ladder. And then the insurance company says, no, our information says that person is actively doing roofing. And since we don't have what we call split codes in the state of New Hampshire, then they're a roofer. Those disputes start through the NCCI process, and if people don't like the result at the NCCI, since that's not anything to do with the claim, but it does in a way. Usually that person's gotten hurt, but it's about a classification, how much you're going to have to pay up front, the rate. Then that comes here to the department, and we have hearings here. I've been the hearings officer on those cases. They can be fascinating factually, and I think we do a good job resolving them. But that's how I would say that we handle things from a regulatory perspective. As far as workers' comp, it is a super important thing, but it is a little more complicated in the sense that it's not just the insurance department regulating it; it's also the Department of Labor. So with that, I'll transition to the rest of the coverages and talk about them that businesses usually encounter from a regulatory perspective. As I said, well, I guess we'll start with two different directions to go. I think we'll start with let's just do autos. So everybody, if you're a company, you need to have an auto policy. You want to make sure if you're a company that you have an auto policy, and you make sure it's a commercial auto policy, not a personal lines auto policy, because if it's a personal lines auto policy and you're doing commercial work, you might get a letter saying your claim's denied down to what's called minimum limits. So there's a statute in the state of New Hampshire that says that insurance companies can't go below a minimum limits. But if you're a company and you have a very high, you want to have high limits, you wouldn't want to get dropped to $25,000 per claim, $50,000 per accident on liability, and 25 for property damage. But again, this area, the reason I transitioned to this is the other highly regulated area. There's two ways of this. So in the personal lines, which we probably don't have to spend much time on here, New Hampshire's a take-all-comers state, so each insurance company has to either write you or affiliate with a company that will write you, so you'll always be able to get insurance. So it's a little bit different model in commercial insurance, which we have the same thing as kind of workers' comp. So you go to your different insurance companies, and if you go to 3 commercial insurance companies, presumably you do that through a producer, and they won't sell it to you. Then you fall into the residual market if you want to go there, or you keep looking. And that's in this case called the CAPE, which is pretty much the same as the workers' comp system. All the insurance companies have gotten together. They're going to handle those claims. The actual paper comes from the company that does that work, called APSO, and then you end up getting a policy, which is, I would say, at least, I mean, it's probably more expensive, but it's at least as good as any other commercial policy. So one of the things about highly regulated areas like auto insurance is that all of the policies are going to be basically the same. And then your risk is going to push the how much you have to pay for it up and down. But I would say there's a company called ISO, which is insurance services office, and they've done pretty much all of the policies you see, and even companies that don't write an ISO policy, they um, they they have very similar policies. All the policies for auto are almost all the same. For liability, there's a lot of statutory provisions, so all of the claims basically get handled the same because of the statutory liability obligations. A lot of insurance coverage attorneys would tell you that they don't even really have to bother with the insurance policy for liability purposes because it's all laid out in the statute. And the same for uninsured motorists. So the way uninsured motorist is, so if someone hits you and there's a bodily injury, not usually property damage, but bodily injury, and so you protected yourself. So if you then the policy has to match that level for uninsured motorists. So if you have a $1 million aggregate, a total as opposed to split limits, then you would get that same amount for uninsured motorist. And that the purpose of that in the state of New Hampshire is so that you can cover yourself. Since we don't have mandatory insurance in the state of New Hampshire for auto, it's highly regulated when you buy it, but you're not required to buy it. The legislature has designed the program so that you're able to protect yourself. Again, so running through it, the what you'll have in usually a policies, you'll have a liability section, you'll have a uninsured motorist section, you'll have a med pay section, and then you'll have your physical damage, we call it, which is usually collision and then comprehensive. Collision is you get into collision. Comprehensive is all those other things that happen that are not really a collision, like fires, for example. So again, that's highly regulated. So I guess my point of saying this is I don't always worry about the what company I buy from and for auto. It's just, I just go for the least expensive in that world because they all should be handling everything the same. And if they aren't, you can call the department and we can look into it for you. But if you want, a company that's a gold standard on claims processing, then you can also talk to your producer and then find out who is doing the best. The next thing I would say is a commercial liability, a CGL policy, and then commercial property. Those are less regulated. There isn't really a statute for the liability piece. So it's a little bit unusual because there isn't really a statute dealing with that. There is for property, there is a we call it a fire statute that applies to fire and lightning. So that's highly regulated. But the game in that area is deciding what kind of policy you want. So if you're a big company, you're going to want to get a CGL policy and you want to get a commercial property policy. Again, you want to talk to your producer since it's not regulated about the quality of company and the cost. And all the companies they all adhere to our laws. I don't mean that and to mean they don't. Some companies aren't adhering to our laws. They're very good at that, but there is probably, I would say, like a gold standard for some companies. But if you're not a big company, then you don't want to get those policies, so you would scratch those off. You'd want to get a BOP. Everybody loves a BOP. I always think a BOP's like a homeowner's policy that's for businesses. It's all self-contained, much like we just went through a homeowner's policy is all self-contained. So you're going to have and an auto policy, you're going to have your liability and your property all kind of stuck together. Things that have kind of new in those areas, in terms of things that people have started getting that they didn't have before, would definitely be cyber liability. So that's, if you have information for, people out in the world and then your information gets compromised and then people can, bring claims on that. There's liability now provisions that didn't used to exist even when I started at the department 12 years ago, but that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. So insurance has kind of taken that on as a new thing to provide coverage for. So that would be, again, you'd probably want to read those provisions. I don't think they're really that uniformed to see exactly what cyber concerns you have, and then get the appropriate type of coverage. So when you're doing coverages, you want to always think about two things. You want to talk about the breadth of coverage you get in terms of everything that's going to be covered, and then you're going to talk about the amount of coverage you get in terms of dollars, based on your exposure. You never want to be in a situation where you have all the great coverages in the world, but then you don't have enough money because if that claim does happen, and you're like, oh, I wish I had gotten higher limits. So always think about your limits. And there's an old rule that if you have zero assets, you probably don't even need insurance because no one's going to be able to come get you. But if you have assets like most people do, especially in a state like New Hampshire, a rich state, the way to protect them is to have insurance. And then the best way to the gold standard I will kind of leave you with is not the gold standard, but the most I would say most important thing to think about if you have assets is to get a commercial umbrella liability policy, and if you in term personal lines too, umbrella policy too for that, because I would say which is held I think for as long as I've been doing insurance for 30 years, that the best deal in the world is an umbrella policy. And what that does, sometimes they're actually detailed policies, other times they're just follow form policy, they're called, which whatever you have them below, they'll just follow along with that. And they sit above those policies below that we've talked about. They sit above the auto policy, the commercial liability policy, the BOP, all of those policies that you have below, they sit above that. And then they just basically extend your limits. So you have more protection. And again, that is just a great bang for the buck. So I would always tell people to get that. And then the last thing I would say is that it's really important, as I said, to all of these things we've talked about quickly, is to sit down with your producer and explain your business to your producer, and you tell him what you think you need. And they've heard these stories many, many times. And so they also have ideas based on what you've told them about your narrative about what other types of insurance, maybe stuff we haven't even talked about here, like professional liability. Not every business needs professional liability, but obviously you're a lawyer or a doctor, you need professional liability. So you need to talk to them. So they'll say, look, these are the things that someone in your position usually gets. And if you have a good producer, you're always going to be in a much better position than someone trying to do it themselves through direct writers. So I would, if you know insurance really well, I would say you can go direct writers. But if you don't, you should have a producer there. They're professionals. They actually do. They have professional liability insurance, and they've been trained to pick out the types of insurance coverage that you need. Again, I know we went kind of fast. If anybody's had something that piqued their interest, and they're going to watch this on tape, again, you can call me and I'm happy to talk about it more with you at 603-271-2502. With that, I think I am going to give it back to Keith because I know the next thing on the list is something I don't know anything about.
Thank you, James. I'll also take this as a great opportunity to remind folks that our consumer services number is 1-800-852-3416. Any questions that a consumer has about products, certainly reach out that way. And we can connect you to James Fox if it's a specific question that can't readily be answered. That being said, we got a few minutes left here in our planned comments to talk about open enrollment, which is open enrollment for health insurance coverage, which actually begins November 1st and runs through, I believe it's going to be mid-January. And I apologize if I don't have that exact date. I'm just double checking now, but that does begin November 1st, where individuals can go to the exchange or healthcare.gov and purchase their own individual health insurance coverage. Certainly recognizing that most individuals in the state of New Hampshire actually obtain their health insurance from their employers. One of the questions that we frequently receive here at the department is about the affordability of insurance. And yes, without question, that is an issue. We're very fortunate in the upcoming year in that we have a fourth carrier entering the marketplace, which is WellSense of New Hampshire. So we will have four carriers, WellSense competing with Anthem, Harvard Pilgrim, and Ambetter for the individual marketplace. One of the new innovations, relatively new innovations, that small businesses may actually be interested in helping afford coverage is what's called an ICHRA, which stands for Individual Coverage HRA or Health Reimbursement Account. It is a fairly complicated product in its design. There's a lot of paperwork. So certainly as a small business, consult with your insurance expert or producer if you're not using one, somebody who helps you with your overall benefit package. The benefits of an ICHRA is has tax advantages to the employer, and it is tax-free to the employee. But there is a lot of complex paperwork there to navigate, but that does help in some ways make insurance a little bit more affordable. So again, you are coming into open enrollment, please review your coverages with your producer. If you're going to be shopping on the exchange or healthcare.gov, be aware that there's an additional carrier. I've been told, I haven't seen the rates myself, but usually with an added company, the company is usually pretty aggressive in trying to attract new customers. So I understand there's some good consumer options out there for insurance coverage for calendar year 2025. And on that, I'm going to end my planned comments with one more piece here, which is if anybody here on this call or listening to this webinar needs help finding an insurance agent, we partner with an organization called the Independent Insurance Agents of New Hampshire. They're referred to as the Big I. And that phone number is 603-224-3965. The website is Big INH, that's BIGINH.com. Please give them a call. They can help you or connect you to an independent agent within your own zip code. And on that, we'd like to open it back up to questions, certainly to those, either online or in the chat.
Yeah, Keith, I'll go first here. I've heard a little bit about the ICRA, very, very little, but I would say one of the questions we get most here at the chamber is just from very small businesses that might be like 3 to 10 employees, and how do they compete on health insurance coverage with corporations, and they regularly will lose employees based on that. I've heard that might be a little bit of a potential help there, but not sure your thoughts.
Yeah, so I would say, Cole, certainly I would encourage you to talk to a producer who can kind of help you navigate that. Everything that we understand, there's just a lot of paperwork. It's an alternative rather to traditional insurance coverage. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely worth exploring. We're always trying to find ways to help individuals, certainly small businesses, find cheaper coverage, but the reality is it's just expensive. How do I say it the right way? Be aggressive, searching for plans. Look for those that have, various, I'm trying to think of the proper word here. There are a lot of trade-offs in the health insurance world, whether it be for higher deductibles, higher co-insurance, in exchange for premiums. What we do know is that, high premiums are the number one obstacle to healthcare in New Hampshire. So if a small business is having trouble with that, definitely explore that ICRA route.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Seeing no other questions here, yes, we'll wrap it up. I'm not sure if there's any closing comments. I think you all have done a great job letting folks know where they can go for more information as well.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'd just say, again, thanks for having us. Sometimes doing these webinars that, kind of lacks that personal feel that we've come to appreciate in that one-on-one interaction, kind of in an in-person setting. But, on behalf of the department, thank you for inviting us. Well, one more time, our consumer services number is 800-852-3416. Bring your insurance questions or complaints to the department. We'll help you out. And if you're looking for a producer to either, navigate, help you find coverage, whether it be an ICRA or other coverage in the marketplace, that number is the Big I at 603-224-3965. And on that, I'm all done. Thank you very much. Hope everybody has a great day.
All right. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, James. All right. Have a great day.